She shrugged off her coat, letting it fall onto the back of the sleek, modern sofa that dominated the living room. The apartment was a reflection of her personality. Sophisticated, minimalist, and meticulously curated. Every piece of furniture, every piece of art, had been carefully chosen to create a sense of calm and order. But her sanctuary, the one place where she could truly let go, was hidden behind a discreet door at the end of the hallway. She kicked off her heels, the cool floor soothing her tired feet as she made her way down the hallway. Her mind was already drifting to the Red Room, a space she had created for herself years ago, a place where she could shed the weight of her responsibilities and embrace her deepest desires. It was her escape, her refuge, a world entirely her own. As she approached the door, her heart began to pound with anticipation. She could almost feel the soft, warm glow of the lights inside, the plush velvet drapes that hung from the ceiling, the cool leather of the chaise lounge waiting for her. She reached for the handle, her fingers brushing against the smooth, polished wood, and then she froze. The door was slightly open. Panic surged through her, sharp and sudden, like a jolt of electricity. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the gap between the door and the frame. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She always locked the door. Always. It was her most guarded secret, the one part of her life she had never shared with anyone. She pushed the door open slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was exactly as she had left it. The deep red walls, the dim lights, the carefully arranged objects that filled the space. But the air felt different, charged with something she couldn't quite place. Someone had been inside. Her stomach twisted with a mix of fear and anger. Who could have done this? How had they gotten in? She stepped into the room, her eyes scanning every corner, every surface, searching for some clue, some sign of who had been here. But everything was exactly as it should be, as if nothing had happened. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Her mind raced as she tried to piece it together. The only person who had access to her apartment was Leo, her 20-year-old son. But he would never. No, he couldn't have. She sank onto the edge of the Shaw's lounge, her legs suddenly weak. The room, once a place of comfort and release, now felt alien and unsettling. Her sanctuary had been violated. Her most private space invaded. What would this mean for her? For her relationship with Leo? The questions tumbled through her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. She had always prided herself on maintaining a perfect balance, on being the strong, composed woman who could handle anything life threw at her. But now she felt raw and exposed, as if the walls she had built around herself were crumbling. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. There would be answers, explanations, but for now she just sat there staring at the door, her heart pounding in her chest as the rain continued to fall outside. Earlier that day, Leo had been in his room, sprawled across his bed with his laptop balanced on his knees. The apartment was quiet, the usual hum of the city outside muted by the thick walls and double-glazed windows. He was supposed to be studying for an upcoming exam, but his focus had been slipping for hours. Every time he tried to concentrate, his mind wandered to the unfinished project at work, the argument he'd had with a friend, the nagging feeling that he was falling behind in life. He was 20 now, an age that had once seemed so grown up. But somehow he still felt like a kid, unsure of his place in the world. Frustrated, he slammed his laptop shut and sat up, running a hand through his messy hair. He needed a distraction, something to break the monotony. His phone was dead, and he couldn't find his charger. He'd had it earlier. He was sure of it, but now it was nowhere to be seen. He got up and began searching his room, tossing aside clothes and books, rummaging through drawers. When it didn't turn up, he decided to look elsewhere in the apartment. He wandered down the hallway, his bare feet padding softly against the cool hardwood floor. The apartment was spacious and immaculate, every surface polished to a shine. His mother, Maya, had always had an eye for design, and the space reflected her personality perfectly: modern, elegant, and meticulously organized. It was a stark contrast to his own room, which was perpetually cluttered with half-finished projects and discarded clothes. He checked the living room first, glancing under the sofa and behind the sleek, minimalist coffee table. No charger. He moved to the kitchen, peeking into drawers and cupboards, but it wasn't there either. Finally, he made his way to the end of the hallway, where a discreet door led to a room he'd never really paid much attention to. His mother had always told him it was a storage space filled with old files and seasonal decorations. He'd never questioned it until now. The door was slightly ajar, and as he approached, he noticed the faint scent of jasmine and sandalwood wafting through the gap. It was a scent he'd caught glimpses of before, always in passing, always fleeting. But now it was stronger, more concentrated, drawing him in. Curiosity got the better of him. He pushed the door open and stepped inside and froze. The room was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls were painted a deep, sensual red, the color of ripe cherries or freshly spilled wine. The lighting was soft and warm, casting a golden glow over everything. Plush velvet drapes hung from the ceiling, creating a sense of intimacy and mystery. The room was filled with objects that seemed both familiar and foreign: delicate restraints made of silk, soft ties that looked like they could be used to bind or be bound, a sleek leather chaise lounge that invited touch, and a collection of artfully arranged devices that he couldn't quite name but instinctively understood. His heart raced as he took it all in, his eyes wide with shock and fascination. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and sandalwood, heady and intoxicating. He felt like he'd stepped into another world, a world that was both forbidden and irresistible. He moved further into the room, his fingers brushing against the velvety drapes. The fabric was soft and luxurious, the kind of thing you'd want to wrap yourself in. He reached for one of the silk ties, the material slipping through his fingers like water. It felt intimate, personal. He turned to the chaise lounge, running his hand along the smooth leather. It was cool to the touch, but he could imagine how it might warm under someone's body. His gaze drifted to the devices arranged on a sleek glass table. They were intricate and beautifully designed with smooth curves and polished surfaces. He didn't know what they were for exactly, but he had an idea. The room was clearly a place of pleasure, a space where someone could explore their desires without judgment or inhibition. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. This was his mother's room. His face flushed as the pieces fell into place. The discreet door, the careful curation of the space, the scent that lingered in the air. It all pointed to Maya. He felt a strange mix of emotions: shock, curiosity, even a hint of admiration. His mother, the woman who had always been so composed, so in control, had this hidden side, a side that was raw and unapologetic. He couldn't look away. The room pulled him in, demanding his attention, his curiosity. But as he stood there, taking it all in, he felt a twinge of guilt. This was her private space, her sanctuary, and he had intruded without permission. Reluctantly, he stepped back, his heart still pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to make of what he'd seen, but he knew one thing for sure: this would change everything. Maya stood outside the red room, her hand frozen on the door handle. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths, the air heavy with the familiar scent of jasmine and sandalwood. It was a scent that usually brought her comfort, but tonight it felt tainted. The door was slightly ajar, a silent confirmation that her sanctuary had been violated. She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor before she kicked them off, needing to feel grounded. The red room welcomed her like an old lover. Its deep crimson walls seemed to pulse with warmth, the soft golden lighting casting long shadows that danced across the plush velvet drapes hanging from the ceiling. This was her haven, her escape. The one place where she could shed the weight of her responsibilities and embrace her truest, most unfiltered self. Her eyes drifted to the sleek leather chaise lounge, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. She ran her fingers along the edge, memories flooding her mind. This was where she had spent countless nights, wrapped in silk and leather, exploring the depths of her desires. It was here that she had first discovered the thrill of dominance, the power of taking control, and the vulnerability of letting go. The chaise had been her companion in moments of ecstasy and introspection, a silent witness to her journey of self-discovery. Her gaze shifted to the silk ties neatly arranged on the glass table. She picked one up, the fabric slipping through her fingers like water. These ties had been her first indulgence, soft yet unyielding, a symbol of restraint and release. She remembered the first time she had used them, her hands trembling slightly as she tied the knot. The sensation of the silk against her skin had been electrifying, a delicate balance of pleasure and pain that had left her breathless. The room was filled with carefully curated objects, each one telling a story. The restraints hanging on the wall had been a gift from a lover, a man who had understood her need for control. The sleek, polished devices on the shelves had been her companions in moments of exploration, each one designed to push her boundaries and awaken new sensations. The mirrors, strategically placed around the room, reflected not just her body, but her soul, capturing every raw, unfiltered emotion she had ever experienced in this space. This room was more than just a physical space. It was an extension of her, a testament to her strength, her vulnerability, her desires. It was here that she had learned to embrace every part of herself, the parts she hid from the world and the parts she'd barely admitted to herself. But now, the room felt different. Her sanctuary had been invaded, her privacy shattered. The thought made her stomach churn, her chest tightening with a mix of anger and fear. She sat on the edge of the chaise, her legs suddenly weak, and buried her face in her hands. The only person who could have been here was Leo, her son. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, dragging her under. She thought of the first time she had discovered the room herself years ago, when she had been searching for a way to reclaim her identity after the end of a tumultuous relationship. It had been a journey of healing and self-discovery, a way to take back control of her life. The Red Room had become her refuge, a space where she could be unapologetically herself. But now it was no longer just hers. Maya felt exposed, raw, as if a layer of her carefully constructed armor had been stripped away. She imagined what Leo must have seen: the silk ties, the restraints, the devices. Would he understand? Would he judge her? Or worse, would he pity her? Her relationship with Leo had always been complicated. She loved him fiercely, but their dynamic had shifted over the years. He was no longer the little boy who needed her for everything. He was a young man, curious and observant, with a mind of his own. She had always tried to maintain a certain distance, to be more than just a mother to him, to be a role model, a mentor, someone he could look up to. But now that distance felt like a chasm. She thought about confronting him, about asking him why he had gone into the room. But the words felt hollow, inadequate. How could she explain something that she had never even tried to put into words? The Red Room was an extension of her, a part of her that she had never shared with anyone, and yet now she would have to. Maya stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She smoothed her hands over her skirt, straightening her posture. The woman who emerged from the Red Room was not the same woman who had entered. She was stronger, more determined, ready to face whatever came next. As she closed the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the room had changed her in ways she didn't yet understand. Later that evening, the apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy and oppressive. Maya sat on the edge of the sofa in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had been waiting for this moment all evening, steeling herself for the conversation she knew was coming. When Leo finally appeared in the doorway, her heart skipped a beat. He looked hesitant, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if he weren't sure whether to stay or turn around. His expression was a mix of confusion and curiosity, his dark eyes searching hers for answers. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Maya nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. She had always prided herself on being composed, on maintaining a sense of control no matter the situation. But now, as Leo settled into the chair across from her, she felt anything but in control. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and emotions. Maya's mind raced, trying to anticipate what he would say, how he would say it. She could see the wheels turning in his head, the same way they had when he was a child, trying to make sense of the world around him. Finally, Leo broke the silence. "So, that room," he began, his words tentative. "What is it?" "I mean, I know it's something," but he trailed off, unsure of how to continue. Maya's heart ached as she watched him struggle to find the right words. She had always been so careful to shield him from this part of her life, to keep her world separate. But now that barrier had been breached, and there was no going back. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "It's a private space," she said slowly, her voice measured. "A place where I can explore certain aspects of myself." Leo frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Aspects of yourself? What does that mean?" Maya hesitated, her mind scrambling for a way to explain without revealing too much. She had always been so protective of her privacy, so careful to keep this part of her life hidden. But now, faced with Leo's curiosity, she felt exposed, vulnerable. "It's a place where I can let go of my responsibilities," she said finally, "where I can explore my desires, my fantasies. It's a form of self-expression, really." Leo's eyes widened slightly, and she could see the realization dawning on him. "So, it's like a sex thing." Maya felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her composure. "It's more than that," she said firmly. "It's about control, about understanding myself on a deeper level. It's not just about physical pleasure. It's about emotional release, too." Leo nodded slowly, but she could tell he was still struggling to process what she was saying. She could see the questions brewing in his mind, the curiosity warring with his discomfort. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" he asked finally. Maya sighed, her hands tightening in her lap. "It's personal," she said carefully. "It's something I've always kept private. It's not something I felt the need to share with anyone." "But I'm your son," Leo said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Shouldn't you have trusted me enough to tell me?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. She looked at him, her heart aching at the hurt in his eyes. "It's not about trust," she said softly. "It's about boundaries. This room, it's a part of me that I've always kept separate from the rest of my life. It's not something I ever expected to have to explain." Leo was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't think you had secrets like that," he admitted. Maya's heart ached at his words. She had always tried to be open with him, to be the kind of parent he could come to with anything. But now she realized she had been so focused on maintaining her composure, on being the strong, unflappable woman he could look up to, that she had forgotten to show him the messy, complicated parts of herself. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice soft but sincere. I didn't mean to make you feel like I was keeping something from you. This room, it's just something I've always kept private. It's not about you, it's about me. Leo nodded slowly, but she could tell he was still processing everything. The conversation had opened a door between them, but neither of them was sure where it would lead. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Leo looked up, his expression softer now. I guess I just didn't expect to see that side of you, he said quietly. Maya smiled faintly, her heart aching with a mix of relief and sadness. I know, she said, but this is part of who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Leo was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay, he said softly. I get it. As the conversation continued, Maya felt a strange sense of clarity. The tension between them had been palpable, thick with unspoken questions and emotions. Leo's curiosity was evident, but so was his discomfort, his struggle to reconcile the image he had of her with the reality of the room. For years, she had kept this part of herself hidden, locked away behind a door that only she had the key to. But now, that door had been opened, and there was no closing it. Instead of retreating, instead of trying to rebuild the walls she had so carefully constructed, she felt a sudden, fierce determination. If Leo had seen the room, if he had glimpsed that hidden part of her, then perhaps it was time to stop hiding. Perhaps it was time to show him not just the room, but the woman who had created it. An idea began to form in her mind, bold and unapologetic. She wouldn't shy away from this. She wouldn't let shame or fear define her. Instead, she would embrace it, use it as an opportunity to show Leo a side of her he had never seen before. A side that was raw, vulnerable, and unapologetically herself. Leo, she said, her voice steady but soft. I want to show you something. He looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. What do you mean? She hesitated for just a moment, then reached out and took his hand. Her touch was firm but reassuring, a silent promise that she was in control, that this was okay. Come with me, she said, leading him down the hallway toward the red room. Leo followed hesitantly, his steps slow and uncertain. She could feel the tension in his hand, the way he held himself back as if he weren't sure what to expect. But she didn't stop, didn't falter. This was her decision, her moment to take control of the narrative. When they reached the door, she paused, her hand resting on the handle. For a brief moment, she hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her sanctuary, the place where she had let go of her inhibitions and embraced her truest self. And now she was about to share it with her son. But she didn't let the hesitation hold her back. She pushed the door open, the soft, warm glow of the light spilling into the hallway. The room was exactly as she had left it. The deep red walls, the plush velvet drapes, the sleek leather chaise lounge, and the collection of carefully curated objects that filled the space. She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The air felt charged, heavy with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. She turned to look at Leo, who was standing in the doorway, his wide eyes taking in the space once again. Come in, she said softly, gesturing for him to join her. Leo hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail, from the silk ties to the restraints, from the mirrors to the devices arranged on the shelves. She could see the questions brewing in his mind, the curiosity wearing with his discomfort. This room, she began, her voice steady but soft, is a part of me. It's a place where I can let go of my responsibilities, where I can explore my desires and my fantasies. It's about control, about understanding myself on a deeper level. Leo nodded slowly, his eyes still scanning the room. It's intense, he said finally, his voice tinged with awe. Maya smiled faintly, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. It is, she agreed, but it's also liberating. It's a space where I can be raw and unfiltered, where I can explore the parts of myself that I don't always show to the world. Leo was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to the floor. I guess I just didn't expect this, he admitted. I know, she said softly, but this is part of who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Leo looked up, his expression softer now. I guess I just didn't know you had a side like this, he said quietly. Maya smiled faintly, her heart aching with a mix of relief and sadness. There's a lot about me that you don't know, she said. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time for you to see the real me, not just as your mother, but as a person. Leo nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. I think I'd like that, he said softly. Maya felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief and pride, and something she couldn't quite name. This was her moment, her chance to show Leo the woman behind the mask, the woman who was strong and vulnerable, controlled and wild all at once. She stepped closer to him, her movement slow and deliberate. This room, she said, gesturing to the space around them, is a reflection of me. It's messy and complicated, just like I am, but it's also beautiful in its own way. Leo nodded, his gaze shifting to the room once again. I can see that, he said softly. For a moment, they stood there, the silence between them filled with a newfound understanding. The Red Room, once a place of secrets and solitude, had become something more, a bridge between them, a space where they could connect on a deeper level. Maya guided Leo to the plush velvet couch, her hand resting gently on his arm. His steps were hesitant, his body tense with uncertainty, but he followed without resistance. The room seemed to close in around them, the air heavy with anticipation. She could feel his unease, the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail, but she remained calm, her presence steady and reassuring. Sit down, she said softly, gesturing to the couch. Leo obeyed, sinking into the soft velvet cushions. His posture was awkward, his hands gripping the edge of the seat as if he were bracing himself for something. Maya knelt in front of him, her eyes meeting his. Close your eyes, she instructed, her voice firm but gentle. Lo hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. Why? Maya smiled faintly, her expression warm but enigmatic. Just trust me, she said softly. There was a moment of silence, a brief standoff as he searched her face for reassurance. Finally, he exhaled and closed his eyes, his hands still gripping the edge of the couch. Maya stood up, her movement slow and deliberate. She moved to the corner of the room where a sleek, ornate wardrobe stood, its doors carved with intricate patterns. She opened it, revealing an array of outfits, silky robes, delicate lingerie, flowing fabrics that shimmered in the soft light. She chose a robe made of deep crimson silk, the fabric smooth and cool against her skin. It clung to her curves, draping over her body in a way that was both sensual and commanding. She changed quickly, but with practiced grace, slipping out of her work clothes and into the robe. The fabric whispered against her skin as she tied the sash at her waist, the movement fluid and unhurried. She glanced at herself in one of the mirrors, her reflection staring back at her, strong, confident, and unapologetic. This was her essence, the part of herself she had always kept hidden. When she was ready, she turned back to Leo, who was still sitting on the couch with his eyes closed. She moved toward him with deliberate steps, the soft click of her heels echoing in the room. The air felt charged, the tension between them growing with each passing moment. Open your eyes, she said softly, her voice a blend of warmth and authority. Leo hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened his eyes. His breath caught as he took her in, his gaze traveling from the robe that clung to her curves to the confident, unwavering look in her eyes. For a moment, he just stared at her, his expression a mix of awe and confusion. Maya smiled faintly, her confidence unwavering. "This room," she began, her voice soft but steady, "is a place of exploration. It's where I come to understand myself, to embrace my desires, and to take control of my own pleasure." Leo nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on hers, but she could see the questions brewing in his mind, the curiosity warring with his discomfort. She stepped closer to him, her movement slow and deliberate. "It's not just about physical pleasure," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's about emotional release, about understanding yourself on a deeper level." Leo swallowed hard, his throat bobbing slightly. "I think I understand," he said quietly, though his voice trembled slightly. Maya reached out, her fingers brushing against his cheek. The touch was gentle but electric, sending a shiver through both of them. She could feel the tension in his body, the way he held himself back as if he weren't sure what to do. "This is about trust," she said softly, her breath warm against his skin. "About letting go of your inhibitions and embracing the moment." Leo's eyes searched hers, his expression a mix of uncertainty and longing. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still, the air between them thick with unspoken emotions. Then slowly, Maya leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a hesitant but electrifying kiss. The kiss deepened, a slow, deliberate dance of exploration and trust. Maya's lips moved with a mix of control and tenderness, her hands cradling Leo's face as if to anchor him in the moment. She could feel his uncertainty, the way his body tensed under her touch, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she guided him, her movements deliberate and confident, teaching him to trust the rhythm between them. The energy in the room shifted, the air thickening with a palpable tension. The soft, golden light of the room seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeat, casting a warm, intimate glow over everything. Maya's crimson silk robe whispered against her skin as she moved, the fabric catching the light with every subtle shift. She was a vision of control and sensuality, her presence commanding yet tender. When she finally pulled back, Leo's breath was ragged, his chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of awe and confusion, as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. Maya smiled faintly, her fingers brushing over his cheek. "Breathe," she murmured, her voice soft but firm. Lo exhaled shakily, his hands gripping the edge of the Shah's lounge as if to ground himself. I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to do anything," Maya reassured him gently. "Just let me guide you." She stood, her movement slow and deliberate, and extended her hand to him. Leo hesitated for a moment, his gaze flickering from her hand to her face, then took it. His grip was firm but uncertain, his fingers warm against hers. She led him further into the room, their footsteps soft against the polished floor, the air around them charged with anticipation. The red room seemed to come alive in a new light, its carefully curated objects taking on a deeper significance. Maya stopped at the glass table where an array of devices lay arranged with precision. She picked up one of the silk ties, the smooth fabric gliding through her fingers like water. "This is about trust," she said softly, holding the tie up for him to see, "about letting go of your inhibitions and embracing the moment." Leo's eyes followed the movement of the fabric, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Maya stepped closer, her movements fluid and unhurried, and looped the tie around his wrist. Close your eyes, she instructed, her voice firm but gentle. Leo hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly, but after a moment, he obeyed. His breathing slowed, the tension in his body melting away as he surrendered to her guidance. Maya's hands were steady as she tied the knot, her touch firm but careful. She could feel the pulse in his wrist, quick but steady beneath her fingertips. Let go, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. Trust me. Leo exhaled deeply, his body relaxing as he let himself drift into the moment. Maya stepped back, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of discomfort, but he seemed calm, his expression soft and trusting. She moved to the Shaw's lounge, her robe whispering against her skin as she sat down. She gestured for him to join her, and after a moment's hesitation, he did. His movement slow and deliberate. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with a heady mix of anticipation and vulnerability. Maya's hands were gentle but confident as she guided him, her touch firm but tender. She introduced him to the devices one by one, each object taking on a new meaning as they explored them together. The silk ties, soft and delicate, became a symbol of trust and surrender. The restraints, cool and unyielding, represented a shared understanding of control and release. The leather chaise lounge, smooth and inviting, became a space of connection where the boundaries between them blurred. With each touch, each movement, the tension between them grew, their connection deepening into something profound. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, emerging of their vulnerabilities and desires. Maya's dominance was tempered by tenderness, her control balanced by a deep understanding of Leo's needs. And Leo, though hesitant at first, found himself surrendering to the experience, his trust in her unwavering. The room, once a place of solitude and self-discovery for Maya, became a space of shared exploration. The intimacy between them evolved, building to a natural climax that left them both breathless. Their connection irrevocably changed. Afterward, they lay together on the Shaw's lounge, their bodies still entwined, breathing slow and steady. The soft golden glow of the room bathed them in a warm, intimate light, casting long shadows that danced across the crimson walls. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, relief, vulnerability, and a profound sense of connection that neither of them had expected. Maya's hand rested gently on Leo's chest, her fingers tracing absent-minded patterns over his skin. Her touch was light, almost reverent, as if she were afraid to break the fragile silence that stretched between them. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more complex and overwhelming than the last. What had just happened between them was beyond words, beyond definition. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered intimacy that had shifted their relationship in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Leo lay beside her, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his expression unreadable. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, but his mind was anything but calm. The experience had been intense, overwhelming, and yet deeply fulfilling in a way he couldn't fully articulate. He had trusted her completely, surrendering to her guidance. And in doing so, he had discovered a side of himself he hadn't known existed. But now, in the quiet aftermath, he was left to process what it all meant. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions, unvoiced fears, and a shared understanding that words could never fully capture. Finally, Maya broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for any sign of discomfort. Lo hesitated, his gaze flickering to hers before returning to the ceiling. I think so," he said quietly. I don't know what to feel right now." Maya nodded, her fingers still tracing gentle patterns on his chest. "That's okay," she said softly. "This was a lot for both of us." Leo exhaled slowly, his body relaxing slightly. "I didn't expect it to be like that," he admitted, his voice tinged with wonder. "I didn't expect to feel so connected to you." Maya's breath caught in her throat, her heart aching with a mix of emotions. She had always been careful to maintain a certain distance between them, to be the strong, composed woman he could rely on. But now that distance felt like it had been erased, replaced by a profound intimacy that left her both elated and terrified. "I didn't either," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we could share this moment together." Leo turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "What does this mean for us?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Things are different now, aren't they?" Maya's chest tightened at the question, her mind racing to find an answer. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady but soft. "Things are different, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing." Leo nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to her hand resting on his chest. I don't know how to process this," he admitted. "It's like I feel closer to you than ever, but at the same time, I don't know where we go from here." Maya smiled faintly, her fingers brushing over his skin. "We take it one step at a time," she said gently. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. What's important is that we trust each other, that we're honest with each other." Leo was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on hers. "I do trust you," he said finally, his voice firm but soft. "More than anyone else." Maya's heart swelled at his words, a warmth spreading through her chest. "And I trust you," she said softly, "more than you know." For a long moment, they lay there in silence, their breathing slow and steady, the soft glow of the room wrapping them in a cocoon of quiet intimacy. The Red Room, once Mia's private escape, now stood as a symbol of their shared vulnerability and connection. It was no longer just her sanctuary. It was theirs, a space where they had explored the depths of their relationship and emerged with a newfound understanding of each other. As the minutes ticked by, the weight of the moment began to settle over them. Their relationship had shifted in ways neither of them could have anticipated, leaving them to navigate a new, uncharted dynamic. It was uncharted territory filled with uncertainties and complexities, but also with the promise of deeper connection and understanding. Maya closed her eyes, her hands still resting on Leo's chest, and let out a slow, steady breath. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That much she knew. Her touch was light, almost reverent, as if she were afraid to break the fragile silence that stretched between them. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more complex and overwhelming than the last. What had just happened between them was beyond words, beyond definition. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered intimacy that had shifted their relationship in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Leo lay beside her, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his expression unreadable. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, but his mind was anything but calm. The experience had been intense, overwhelming, and yet deeply fulfilling in a way he couldn't fully articulate. He had trusted her completely, surrendering to her guidance. And in doing so, he had discovered a side of himself he hadn't known existed. But now, in the quiet aftermath, he was left to process what it all meant. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions, unvoiced fears, and a shared understanding that words could never fully capture. Finally, Maya broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for any sign of discomfort. Lo hesitated, his gaze flickering to hers before returning to the ceiling. I think so," he said quietly. I just, I don't know what to feel right now. Maya nodded, her fingers still tracing gentle patterns on his chest. That's okay, she said softly. This was a lot for both of us. Leo exhaled slowly, his body relaxing slightly. I didn't expect it to be like that, he admitted, his voice tinged with wonder. I didn't expect to feel so connected to you. Maya's breath caught in her throat, her heart aching with a mix of emotions. She had always been careful to maintain a certain distance between them, to be the strong, composed woman he could rely on. But now that distance felt like it had been erased, replaced by a profound intimacy that left her both elated and terrified. I didn't either, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we could share this moment together. Leo turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers. What does this mean for us? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Things are different now, aren't they? Maya's chest tightened at the question, her mind racing to find an answer. Yes, she said finally, her voice steady but soft. Things are different, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Leo nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to her hand resting on his chest. I don't know how to process this, he admitted. It's like I feel closer to you than ever, but at the same time, I don't know where we go from here. Maya smiled faintly, her fingers brushing over his skin. We take it one step at a time, she said gently. We don't have to have all the answers right now. What's important is that we trust each other, that we're honest with each other. Leo was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on hers. I do trust you, he said finally, his voice firm but soft. More than anyone else. Maya's heart swelled at his words, a warmth spreading through her chest. And I trust you, she said softly, more than you know. For a long moment, they lay there in silence, their breathing slow and steady, the soft glow of the room wrapping them in a cocoon of quiet intimacy. The Red Room, once Mia's private escape, now stood as a symbol of their shared vulnerability and connection. It was no longer just her sanctuary. It was theirs, a space where they had explored the depths of their relationship and emerged with a newfound understanding of each other. As the minutes ticked by, the weight of the moment began to settle over them. Their relationship had shifted in ways neither of them could have anticipated, leaving them to navigate a new, uncharted dynamic. It was uncharted territory filled with uncertainties and complexities, but also with the promise of deeper connection and understanding. Maya closed her eyes, her hands still resting on Leo's chest, and let out a slow, steady breath. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That much she knew.